Hello survivors and welcome to another Walking Dead Road to Survival video, and in this video we're going to be doing a starter guide for Gold Mythic Mike. This is a character that has been requested from me quite a few times, and if you do want to see my breakdown of Mike when he was first released, just going over his skills and how they work, there should be a link to a preview video above. But this is, like I say, just going to be a starter guide. We're going to go over the skills, mods, weapon options, and how I like to put him into teams, and whether I think he's worth it on attack teams and defense teams. Spoiler alert, he's worth it on both, but how I use him on attack teams versus how I use him on defense teams. So first of all, we'll go into the skills, and I believe everything is maxed out on his rush, as you can see, but he might actually need something on his signature move. He doesn't. Okay, so it's all actually maxed out on his rush and his signature move. They are both very good, very, very good, particularly this signature move. If you do get up to limit break 3, high levels of infection, really useful. We'll get onto that later on in the video in terms of how I actually use him in the gameplay. And when it comes to his mythic abilities, I think the majority of these are good and they're probably all worth maxing out, but there is one that's completely RNG, but we'll just go through it. Cunning is good on an attack team in particular because it stops certain weapons actually proccing on defense, or gives them a very low chance. For instance, Mr. Lou's infection doesn't proc very often against Mike because he's got Cunning, and Mr. Lou's infection is in his 3rd slot, so it's really good. And if you have a stun on attack weapon with Mike, it's like a free attack against like stun on defense weapons, all that good stuff. So it's actually really good to max this out as quickly as possible. Cunning is really powerful. On a defense team, it is nice still. It can stop like double attack, it can stop the 45% attack when attacking with 50% HP characters. But it isn't as amazing as it is on attack, in my opinion. Just not being controlled by weapons is so nice. Crippling Affliction is awesome. It works really well with his signature move. It does mean when he does his signature move or any basic attacks, they get 80% heal reduction, which is huge amounts of heal reduction. He can also use that with other parts of his kit, which we'll get onto in a second. Gore Shield is the only one I don't think you have to upgrade, but I still did. 40% chance isn't that high. So if you are low on military supplies, you know, that's the way it is. It's more useful, I think, on an attack team than a defense team. It's just more of an annoyance on a defense team. But you get 40% chance to give a teammate a Guardian Shield if he does proc that specialist skill, which is Bodyguard. So I think it's decent, but like I say, if you're running short on those military supplies, this is the one you can potentially avoid. Now, Pestilence is probably the most awesome passive in his kit, and honestly, probably in a lot of people's kits, especially considering Mike doesn't have huge kill potential by himself. But that means makes such a good support character. Once other people getting kills, I just love it. I just love it. And it also works with his Crippling Affliction, which is above with the 80% heal reduction. He can just go around basic attacking the characters that he has got this to proc on after takedowns. So it's really useful, the combination between multiple parts of his kit. I like it a lot. So we'll get on to Mike's combat mods now, and it is imperative to use either defense set or HP set on Mike. This is a must. He doesn't get any bonuses at all from using crit or attack, so massively avoid those. HP is the most important stat for him, but he still needs a lot of defense. The reason HP is quite important is because when he procs Bodyguard, the only reduction that he gets is from the Bodyguard specialist skill itself. It doesn't then go on to his defense stat and then do any reductions. It's just pure damage after that. So let's say someone else takes 20,000 damage. Mike will then Bodyguard that and reduce it by 50% down to 10,000, because that's how Bodyguard works. But then it will just hit him for 10,000. His defense will not negate anything. So he needs to have a reasonable amount of HP, especially if you're going to use him on an attack team. Like I use Lydia on attack, and she gets bombarded, and she can get hit for like, 40k, but then obviously Mike's going to reduce that down to 20, so he still needs, a reasonable amount of HP. So like I say, defense or HP set, but you have to have a HP mod if you're going to go with defense set. If you go with HP set, you can go on HP. It's a bit risky to go too far into HP. It really depends on the teams you're using him in. If you're going to use him on a PAM team, you want to try and balance out that defense and HP as much as possible. But giving him like 5 or 10k more HP is not a terrible idea. Now in the top right hand corner, simple, it doesn't matter whether he's on attack or defense. Defense versus alert is the way to go. Try and go for your highest percentage. These are one of the few ones where I'd say off trait is absolutely fine, but try and just get at least 50% plus in this sort of area. As you can see, I've had to go offset, and this is because I've got a 55% defense versus alert here, and it's just well worth going offset, especially as I don't have any platinum available defense versus alert, and I'd have to go down to gold. That would not be good. Now in the resist slot, it is actually kind of crazy what you could go for here. Because he's a specialist bodyguard, the only thing that stops bodyguard from proccing is stun. So you can go for stun resist to stop that from actually being a problem. Or on an attack teams, you can absorb main damage that someone else takes, which is kind of crazy. And he can take no damage when he does his bodyguard. So if someone takes main damage on, like, from Marcus is everywhere for me, and they attack my Lydia especially, he can absorb it and take 0 damage. It's so useful. So main resist is pretty good, but I'd say stun resist is kind of a must if you do want to use him on a defense team, just because of the fact that it will stop his specialist skill from actually working, and his specialist skill is very, very important. Now in the bottom left hand corner, it's kind of what you've got available, because auxiliary mods, while they are powerful, they're not that powerful at the same time. It's kind of, they're very situational. For instance, I like to go for defense while disarmed, and you can see I've got a couple of defense while disarmed there, and I'm going to put it on him. However, I've seen people use graze, and it is good when it actually works, but it's got quite a low chance to happen. So it's very RNG there. But you could say the same for disarm to a certain extent. If people don't run disarm, his auxiliary mod's never going to work. So it's a toss-up really. It's completely up to you what you want to do. The only other option you've got is defense while stunned. But obviously the thing about him being stunned is people will just ignore him and do damage to other people because his specialist skill is not going to work anymore. So yeah, the only problem with Mike, however, is if he's alive for too long, he can start getting that pestilence to just roll around the team, and you want to take him out early generally. So that's why it can maybe play into a bit of a bonus there. You could potentially go for reflect as well if you think he's getting taken out very easily, and hopefully take out a damage dealer. I'm not a big fan of reflect. I don't like how it works personally, but if you want to use it, it's up to you. So I'm going for defense while disarmed. I probably would go for graze if I had a really good one, but I don't actually have any, so defense while disarmed is it. Now in the last slot, it's completely up to you what you want to do, whether you want to go for another resist or you want to go for another stat. You know, you want to go for the opposite stat that you have in the top left hand corner. For in this case, it would be defense on defense. I get a nice defense boost. It would be pretty decent. I'm going to be using a defense leader, so it would actually be better for me if I had HP on HP and then defense in this slot, but I don't actually have that many HP on HP mods, as you know. You could also go for another resist, and taunt is very everywhere on defense teams, and if you do want to use this guy on attack, I would say using taunt resist is kind of important for me personally. And on defense, there is still a reasonable amount of taunt on attack teams, and there are some people using some of these defensive characters on attack at the moment, so it will work there, no doubt. So I've locked in this mod, and it is going to be a taunt resist. I've used this setup for a little while. The only other option I think you've got is swapping out, let's say, stun resist for main resist, and then going for defense while stunned in the bottom left hand corner, or graze in the bottom. There's a couple of options here, but not that many, honestly. Just especially at the moment with the current effects that are being used. You can see his stats have gone to 30k, 30k plus, which is kind of decent. You want that to be where it goes to. We'll be using heavy stat weapons on him, which we'll get into a second, but it doesn't really matter what leader you're going to have when he's got sort of even stats at this point. You can offset the difference on his weapon if you so need to. So for instance, if he had higher HP, I could give him slightly higher defense weapon if I was going to use it with a Pam lead, and if he had higher defense, I could give him slightly higher HP weapon if I'm going to use him with a Zeke lead. So I think a weapon like this is ideal for Mike, and this is just because it's going to reduce any targeted damage, and I personally can take out Mike's first turn quite a lot of the time. Unless they've got this is going to be quite troublesome, because I generally try and nuke Mike with Lydia, but if they've got this, it's much, much harder to do. Now another weapon you could use is potentially this, but you're going to take a lot more damage. This was much easier to make. The AP down weapon here is base, the Aaron's Club. You can get that off the 4-star weapon wheel. It comes with AP down, and you can get some pretty heavy stats on this. This is nice. So instead of going for that 4 slot, you could go for minus 50% damage from critical hits, and this would be absolutely fine. However, if you're fortunate enough to have a weapon like this, I think this is probably the best kind of weapon you can go for. It's up to you what you want to put into the other slots. I went with the defense bonus there just because it's nice to have if you don't have another character with defense bonus, and you're going to be proccing the absolute defense 35% of the time anyway. I guess you could go for the 50% reduction here as well. It's completely up to you, but absolute defense is extremely frustrating on Mike. It's got, a 1 in 3 chance to block any basic attacks on the first turns. So that's really good at stopping that, early focus and trying to take him out. Now on attack, I only use one weapon on Mike, and it is this weapon right here. It has slightly more HP than defense. Those defensive weapons you saw had slightly more HP than defense because I use a ZKL lead. But on attack, I mainly go for slightly more HP than defense, mainly because he's not going to get focused. It's going to be my damage dealers that do, and he has to absorb more damage. And obviously, if I have someone who gives bonus HP, which I do, he's going to get more bonus HP from having higher base HP. Now, the only thing I potentially could change on this weapon is that second slot. I have thought about potentially having it so that the second slot does AP on defense instead of defense, because when that actually procs, when his specialist skill procs any bodyguards and he takes damage, it does actually proc his weapon as well, but it doesn't proc like on hit, so he won't do any like AP downs or anything like that, but it would proc things like AP on defense, so he'd actually have a chance of getting a quick rush, and on an attack team that could be really, really useful. That 4 slot is extremely important if you do plan to use him in a heavy, strong team, and I think that's where he shines, is because he's going to be that support character that boosts everyone attack, and because he boosts their attack, they're going to have more likeliness to get the kills, and when they get the takedowns, there's going to proc his passives, which is going to infect the other characters. You can get like fights that would generally take maybe 5 to 7 turns, taking like 4 to 5 turns instead, just because you're going to speed things up by 1 or 2 turns, because those last 2 characters aren't going to have any healing, and that's where his passive is going to come into play, and it's really, really nice. However, if you don't have a strong attacks weapon, I'd go for a weapon sort of like this, but instead of that second slot, it'll be AP on defense, and then just shoot that HP up a little bit more. 1535 just to buff the characters around him, but the strong attacks weapon is the most important in my opinion. The most important thing about Mike is not to use a weapon like this. Although it sounds like it should work with Mike, it actually doesn't, where he will revive someone based on getting a takedown. Infection kills do not proc weapons like this. And while he might get maybe 2 kills for you every time you attack, just based on how it all works, he will not proc this weapon at all, and it's just a wasted 3rd slot. So avoid this on attack and definitely on defense. Now, before I do any team building stuff, I just want to show you how he actually works on a team. And this is particularly important on defense teams, not so much on attack teams because that's what he's there for. But on defense team, he's only as strong as your weakest character. When S-Class could be used, you could one-shot any bodyguard by just attacking the S-Class characters. In certain circumstances, it was actually worth, using bodyguards with S-Classes. But if you have a weak character on your defense team or an offensive one, someone can just destroy that offensive character. They won't take any damage. Mike will absorb it, and you'll see what happens if I just do a basic attack here. He's just taken 1,800,000 damage, and that means that I actually did 3.6 million damage because he reduces it by 50%. Even if he does reduce it by 50%, you can just wreck damage dealers way too far hard. So I've seen people use like Michonne 2000 on defense teams and stuff. You can't really use a bodyguard with her unless you've got like some extreme idea of a setup, really. It's not going to work. So these are the sort of teams that Mike does work pretty well in, just because you can see all the stats are pretty high, and you can see the same sort of deal whenever he's on a PAM team. I have seen him be used on PAM teams quite a lot, and once the bonus HP gets rolling on PAM teams, it's very hard to get through it, and Mike just has so much high survivability because obviously the bonus HP will absorb any bodyguard damage that comes in as well. So there's a lot of nice ways you can use Mike in teams. Basically, as long as you have reasonably good defensive stats on all the rest of your characters, Mike is generally safe. He's not going to be in too much trouble unless someone focuses him directly, and that's where his weapon and mods are coming into play. So you've got to make sure that sort of stuff is set up so he can't absolutely be annihilated off the bat. Now, on an attack team, I like to use my support characters in a line and my damage dealers in a line. And this is so that my support characters don't have to hold 1535 weapons, and my damage dealers do, so they buff each other. And then Mike can hold the weapon that I showed you that he was holding before, which is the strong attacks weapon, this weapon just here. And he's going to buff everybody by 40% attack at the start of every turn. It's going to be very, very useful. It's not going to buff William or anyone who would stand next to him. I mean, it would, the weapon would, but he's not going to get any like direct buffs with 50 and 35s and stuff. You can see the leader attack stat is quite low because of this. So if you do want your leader to do more damage, maybe you've got to have a different setup. It's honestly, it's up to you on how you want to build your teams here. But Mike, generally, as long as you have quite high HP, 40k is nice. I've got him with a character that is going to give bonus HP as well. So off the first turn, he'll probably have like another 20 to 30k bonus HP. And he'll be able to, you know, absorb quite a lot of damage that goes towards Lydia and Titan or any other damage dealer. So we can see at the start of the fight, I have got the 40% attack on all my team. This is amazing. Obviously, this is great. And you can see I'm coming up against one of those Pam tanky teams. I see this quite a lot. This is quite like a reasonably accessible team. You might have low-grade Pam and low-grade Luz, but they're still going to be pretty dangerous. I like to take out the Mikes on defense team first, but I'm going to just tell you how I like to use my Mike. So we're going to go through the attacks first. I'm going to try and just either take out the Mike or control him. We just want to get some stuns in or something. I don't think we did. It doesn't look like it, which is not good, but we'll see what we would normally do. Maybe you would think, no, with my Mike, I can just follow up the attack. What I like to do with Mike on his signature move is take out someone who is not super troublesome, but is maybe a bit like tanky or can slow down fights, and that's someone like Steve or Kapoor or something like that, just because they take a lot of hits. They may not be able to do much with those hits, unless you do obviously have a lot of bide going off. But if I just do it against Steve, you can see he's going to get a 2-turn infection, 80% heal reduction, and this is great. And I think you've just seen the proc of the... here comes the attack. I think there must have been a proc because we've got a Guardian Shield of his bodyguards. Oh yeah, he has actually been maimed. So I think someone else must have got maimed instead. And that's what he's there for. You can see the 50% infection on Steve's still there. So he's definitely going to get taken out next turn. And this is what the power of Mike is like. You know, like he's taking out hugely tanky characters. I'm just going to hit the auto button quickly. And you're going to see Steve just get dropped off now, which is awesome. And then once Steve is dropped, you're going to see someone else get infected. Who gets infected? It should be... it is actually Pam, but she did heal 30% of it. But I can follow it up with a basic attack and then just get the heal reduction onto Pam so that she can't actually heal that up the next turn, because I think Pam's is a 30% heal. So it's nice. It's nice how it all comes together. And I personally love using Mike on an attack team. I think he's very, very underrated. So that's just a quick starter guide for Mike, just pointing you in the right direction. I definitely say you want to tweak his combat mods and tweak his weapon based on how you want to play and the kind of teams you want to use him in. That's pretty much it. Mike is quite a versatile character, but HP is very, very important regardless of where you put him, especially if you're wanting to utilize that bodyguard skill, which is pretty much one of the best things about him. The specialist skill is very powerful indeed. Do tell me how you're going to get out Mike. Do you use Mike much already? Is he someone who you haven't really looked at? I would definitely say he's worth looking at. He can be a great support character on defense or attack. That is the end of my video, guys. I want to thank you very much for tuning in. And as always, keep on surviving, guys. Keep on surviving.